Before we dive in, let us ask you something. Have you ever built something with your own two hands, only to discover the rot was growing from the inside? This is the story of a quiet man in seat 1A, a man nobody recognized until it was too late. Stay with us. What he uncovered at 30,000 feet could change everything you thought you knew about flying. Before we get into it, let us know. What time are you listening to this, and where are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments. We're listening. Malcolm Everhart never did like the sound of his own name being said out loud. Not in boardrooms, not at ceremonies, not even at the private dinners where people toasted to his unbelievable journey. Maybe that's why, on that quiet Thursday morning, he handed his ID to the gate agent at Oakland International Airport with a different name printed on the ticket. Mark Ellis. The agent barely looked up as she scanned the boarding pass. No fanfare, no special attention. And Malcolm? He liked it that way. He was wearing a worn navy button-down, jeans that had seen too many wash cycles, and sneakers that no one would ever guess had once stepped out of a Gulf Stream. That was the point. A black man dressed plainly, traveling alone, with a first-class ticket in his hand. He'd seen how that story usually played out. But today he wasn't here to make a scene. He was here to listen, to watch, to feel the air inside the machine he had built. A machine that lately had been coughing smoke through customer complaints, most of them from people who looked a lot like him. He could have sent someone else, could have had his chief of operations run an audit. He could have reviewed numbers and called it a day. But the stories, God, the stories. Families being skipped over for upgrades. Black men questioned twice at check-in. Women turned away from the lounge because their attire didn't meet standards. What the hell does that even mean? Malcolm sipped the gas station coffee he picked up on the way in. Bitter, a little burnt, and exactly right for the morning. It was 5:37 a.m. The terminal wasn't full yet. Just the janitor mopping near the windows, a couple dozing business travelers, and that familiar voice overhead reminding passengers not to leave their bags unattended. He stood near gate 14, looking out at the runway lights blinking in a sleepy rhythm. A Skyinova jet sat there waiting, sleek, quiet, almost innocent looking, like it didn't know the weight of the culture it carried. He thought about his mom, Miss Elaine. She used to work 2 jobs cleaning homes so he could focus on school. Told him once, "People won't always see you, Malcolm, but that doesn't mean you stop being visible." Funny how long that sentence stayed with him, like a mantra stitched into his spine. He checked the time again. Still 20 minutes until boarding. He pulled out his phone, not the one synced to his corporate team, but the personal one. The one that didn't ping unless someone really needed him. No messages, just silence. The kind of silence that comes before something shifts. He sat down near the window, legs crossed, fingers interlocked. His mind went to the reports, not just the emails. He remembered the woman who cried in the voicemail, saying her father was denied assistance with a wheelchair. The young teacher whose luggage was lost after an altercation with a staff member. The family who didn't receive an apology, only a form letter. It made his stomach turn. Malcolm wasn't new to injustice. He'd grown up in it, waded through it, climbed over it like vines on a brick wall. But to see it in his own house, in the very company that bore the name he gave it, felt like betrayal by a reflection. A voice called out, "Pre-boarding for Flight 882 to Chicago." He stood up slowly, adjusted the strap of his carry-on, and made his way toward the gate. Each step felt like a quiet vow, not just to find out the truth, but to face it, whatever it looked like. He handed over the boarding pass again. The scanner beeped. The agent nodded him through without a smile. No problem. He didn't need smiles this morning. What he needed was clarity. As he walked down the jet bridge, cool recycled air brushing past his face, Malcolm let go of the name people clapped for in conference rooms. Today he was Mark Ellis, a passenger like any other. And if someone on that plane thought he didn't belong up front, well, they were about to learn who really did. The plane hadn't even taken off, and already Malcolm felt it. That shift in temperature you can't quite measure, but you can feel it in your chest. He'd barely stepped into the first-class cabin when it hit him like stale air from an overworked vent. The look. Not from all of them, just one. The flight attendant at the front, blonde, maybe mid-40s, well-kept makeup, crisp uniform, turned as he entered. She gave a smile to the elderly white couple ahead of him. "Welcome aboard," she said, voice light, rehearsed. Then came Malcolm. She blinked once. Smile gone. Posture stiffened, almost instinctive. No welcome aboard, no nothing, just silence. He nodded politely, making his way to seat 1A. The aisle was narrow, as always, but he knew the layout of this aircraft like the back of his hand. After all, he helped design it. The custom lighting, the extra leg room, the materials in the headrest. Every detail had his fingerprints on it, but none of that mattered now, because Brooke Mallory didn't see any of that. She didn't see the man who wrote the company's first employee code of ethics, or the man who negotiated their initial fleet purchase back in '09. No, what she saw was a black man in a casual button-down and sneakers, sitting in first class without a briefcase or a wedding ring. A puzzle she didn't think fit. As Malcolm slid his carry-on into the overhead bin, Brooke finally spoke. "Sir, are you sure this is your seat?" The tone wasn't curious, it was skeptical. And the question wasn't about logistics, it was about belonging. Malcolm kept his voice calm, almost amused. "Pretty sure? Yeah." "Okay." She didn't respond, just stood there for a beat too long, like maybe he'd realize he was mistaken and slink off to coach. When he didn't, she turned away without a word and moved toward the galley. He exhaled slowly, taking his seat. The cabin began to fill. A man in a navy suit sat across the aisle, giving Malcolm a polite nod before returning to his phone. A young woman in a red blouse settled behind him, already pulling a sleep mask down. Brooke moved down the aisle, offering orange juice and sparkling water. Tray balanced, posture perfect. Malcolm waited. She passed him by. No glance. No offer. "Okay," he pressed the call button. It lit up, silent but obvious. Brooke returned a minute later, neutral face in place. "Yes?" Malcolm met her eyes. "Could I get some water, please?" She nodded, not breaking eye contact. "Of course." But she didn't move. Instead, she tilted her head. "You know, sir, we've had some issues lately with passengers in the wrong cabin. Do you mind showing me your boarding pass again? Just to confirm." There it was. Malcolm didn't flinch. He reached into his shirt pocket and handed her the pass. She stared at it, lips pursed, as if the barcode might suddenly dissolve and reveal some deeper truth. "All right," she said finally, handing it back. Still no water. Malcolm tucked it away and leaned back, hands resting on the armrest. No need to escalate. Not yet. He'd seen this game before. It wasn't just about rudeness. It was about power. The kind of small, petty power that people like Brooke used, like a dull blade. Subtle, quiet, but just sharp enough to remind you of your place. He glanced down at his phone, opened the Sky Nova app. The internal audit tools weren't flashy. Just a few dashboards, incident logs, timestamp records, all passively synced. As of this morning, this flight hadn't registered anything unusual. Not yet. Brooke returned 5 minutes later and placed a tiny plastic cup of room temperature water on his tray without a word. Then she walked away. Behind her, a young male attendant, maybe late 20s, Asian American, watched the exchange. His name tag read Darius. He hesitated, then turned away quickly when he saw Malcolm looking. Malcolm sipped the water and stared straight ahead. 1 hour and 45 minutes to Chicago. This wasn't going to be a quiet flight after all. And something told him Brooke wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. Not to rest, but to listen. To remember. To get ready. Because when people like Brooke Mallory handed you a glass of water with that smile and that tone, it never came without strings. And Malcolm Everhart didn't pull strings. He cut them. Some folks think that when trouble walks in, it does so with a bang. Doors swinging open, voices raised, drama thick in the air. But Malcolm knew better. Trouble, real trouble, liked to tiptoe. It crept in quietly, through glances that lingered too long and smiles that didn't reach the eyes. That's how it started, always. He sat quietly in 1A, fingers gently tapping the armrest in rhythm with the hum of the engines. There was no anger on his face, no reaction at all. just that calm stillness, something he'd spent decades mastering. Because when you're a black man in charge of a $1 billion company, people will test your calm every day just to see if they can make it crack. Across the aisle, Brooke was serving breakfast to the gentleman in 1B with a sweetness that could have been bottled. "Would you prefer the frittata or the croissant this morning, Mr. Langdon?" Her voice was syrupy, her smile warm. Then she reached his row again. No smile, no menu. Just a tray of pre-selected food she set down in front of Malcolm like she was placing mail on a stranger's doorstep. He looked at the plate. Cold eggs. No cutlery. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his tone even. "Is this what I ordered?" She barely glanced at the tray. "We're limited on options today." He waited. She didn't elaborate, didn't offer an alternative, just turned her back again. Darius, standing near the galley curtain, was watching. Malcolm caught his eye for a moment. Darius shifted his weight from one foot to the other, then looked down quickly. A few minutes passed. Then, as Brooke returned up the aisle, Malcolm saw her stop mid-stride and pull out her company-issued tablet. She tapped something, quickly, subtly, and tucked it away before continuing on. That was odd. He reached for his phone and quietly accessed the Sky Nova crew log, a system few employees even knew he had clearance for. A few taps in, and he found it. There it was. Passenger 1A, exhibiting passive-aggressive behavior, logged for future observation, notified ground security for awareness. Malcolm blinked slowly. His heart didn't race. His breathing didn't change. But inside something shifted. It wasn't just rudeness anymore. It was something deliberate. He set the phone down and leaned back. Let the weight of it settle. She was documenting him, building a case before anything had even happened. He looked out the window, the clouds passing below like soft ghosts. And for a moment, he thought of a man named Terrence Ward, a school teacher, one of their passengers last spring. Terrence had filed a complaint about being mistreated on a flight, said he was denied water during a coughing fit, labeled disruptive, and nearly removed midair. The internal report had labeled it resolved passenger misread situation, case closed. But something about that report had always sat wrong with Malcolm. Now it all started making sense. He picked up the plastic cutlery packet another flight attendant had left behind and unwrapped it slowly, almost methodically. Not out of hunger, he hadn't touched the food, but just to keep his hands busy while his mind worked. A soft voice broke the tension. "Sir?" It was Darius, holding a napkin and a real set of silverware. His voice wasn't steady, but it wasn't shaking either. "Thought you might need this," he said, placing it gently on Malcolm's tray. "Thank you," Malcolm replied. Their eyes met again, and in that brief second, Darius did something small, but unmistakable. He slipped Malcolm a folded note beneath the napkin. When Darius turned away, Malcolm unfolded it beneath the tray. "Be careful. They've done this before." Malcolm didn't move, didn't flinch, but inside he felt that old fire flare to life. Not anger, not yet, but a cold, focused burn. The kind of flame you stoke quietly until it's time to light the whole damn room. He slipped the note into his wallet and opened the crew file list again. Cross-referenced Brooke's name, 3 flags, 3 previous complaints, 2 dismissed. All involved passengers of color, all marked, resolved, no action required. He looked up toward the galley. Brooke was back to smiling, laughing with the pilot, moving like someone who knew she'd never been caught. But Malcolm was watching now, and the log was running. He didn't know what Brooke's endgame was, but she had made one critical mistake. She'd assumed he was just another seat in 1A, not the man who signed the paychecks. And that mistake? Well, it was about to cost her a whole lot more than breakfast. Brooke didn't notice the change in Malcolm, not right away. She was too busy keeping up the rhythm she'd perfected over the years. The polite nods, the calculated smiles, the empty kindness offered like mints at a front desk. To the untrained eye, she looked efficient, professional, in control. But Malcolm wasn't untrained. He saw the slight tension in her jaw whenever she passed his row, the way her fingers curled inward as if gripping something invisible. The speed of her footsteps, half a beat too quick when walking by him. These were the things most passengers missed, but he caught them all. She was rattled, Not enough to show it out loud, but enough that her performance was slipping at the seams. He watched quietly as she made her way down the aisle, offering top-shelf wine to a couple in 2B and 2C, all warm laughter and soft gestures. The man chuckled, touched her arm lightly. She didn't pull away. Back in the galley, she typed something again into her tablet. Quick taps. Glances over her shoulder. Malcolm opened the audit interface on his phone. A few commands and he was back in the restricted log Brooke never knew he could see. Another entry. Passenger 1A now making staff uncomfortable. Continued passive behavior. No verbal threats. Flag for further documentation. His mouth tightened. Continued passive behavior. What the hell did that even mean? Sitting still and minding his business had officially become a threat. That wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. That was framing. The seatbelt light pinged on. The plane hit some turbulence. Mild, but enough to rattle the glasses. One tipped on the tray in 1C, and Malcolm instinctively reached forward to steady it for the elderly man sitting there. The man smiled and thanked him softly. A few rows behind, Brooke saw it. She wrote nothing. Of course she didn't. Darius passed by again, this time collecting trash. His eyes flicked down, checking Malcolm's tray, then met his eyes for half a breath. No smile, no words. Just that quiet understanding, the kind that only passed between people who'd both been made to feel like they didn't belong. After the trash run, Darius ducked into the galley, Brooke behind him. The curtain closed. Voices followed, not shouting, but not hushed either. Malcolm didn't need to hear every word. He caught enough. "You need to learn how to back me up," Brooke hissed. A pause. "I didn't see anything wrong with how he was behaving." "You don't need to see it. You follow the process. You've read the manual." Another pause, shorter. "I think this is going too far." The curtain shifted, then footsteps. Darius emerged face pale, lips tight. He walked down the aisle like his spine was stuck in a decision he hadn't made yet. Malcolm sat back. He knew that posture. He'd worn it himself many years ago, back when he had to smile through clenched teeth at bankers who called him kid in meetings about his own company. He turned to the window. The clouds had thinned. Blue sky now stretching out in all directions. But his mind wasn't in the sky. It was in the cabin logs. He opened a deeper layer of the audit archive, something his executive team had designed years ago for internal integrity reviews. They'd called it Shadow Glass, a digital mirror that didn't just track staff behavior, but patterns. He searched Brooke Mallory. 5 incidents logged in the last 18 months. 3 passengers labeled disruptive, 2 removed from flights. All 5, black or brown. All 5, complaints filed within 48 hours of landing. None escalated. All flagged, closed, no action. The system wasn't broken. It was being used exactly the way it was designed, to hide things, bury them, dress them up in professionalism and procedure. Malcolm leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the tray table. He opened the company's policy document on incident escalation. Section 4.3, staff may request discretionary removal if a passenger is perceived to pose discomfort to crew. Perceived discomfort. That was the loophole, the trick, the silent permission. He closed the file. The curtain rustled again. Brooke returned to the cabin with a pot of coffee, refilling cups like nothing had happened. When she reached his row, she didn't ask. Just poured a thin stream into the cup already on his tray. It spilled a little over the edge. She didn't wipe it, just looked at him for a second longer than needed, as if daring him to say something. Malcolm looked up. "Thanks," he said evenly. She moved on. He picked up the cup, dried the edge with his napkin, and stared at the dark surface. The coffee rippled lightly in his hand, catching the overhead lights. In that tiny pool of movement, Malcolm saw what most people missed. It wasn't just a bad employee. It was a system that gave her cover, and it was his system. He sat there quiet, steady. But inside, something sharp and certain was forming. This wasn't about one flight anymore. It was about all the ones that came before, and every one still to come. Malcolm didn't touch the coffee again. It sat on his tray like a prop in a play he hadn't agreed to be part of. He wasn't angry, not outwardly. Anger was loud, and loud wasn't safe. He'd learned that as a boy. In a world that labeled black men as aggressive for simply being human, quiet was armor. Stillness was strategy. But inside, he was boiling. He'd seen enough. Brooke had moved on to the second beverage service, gliding through the cabin with ease. Too much ease, Malcolm thought, like someone who believed there'd never be consequences. Her voice was once again syrupy sweet when she poured wine for the white couple in 3C and 3D, gently resting her hand on the man's shoulder as she laughed at some half-hearted joke. No coldness there, no tight-lipped professionalism, just warmth, belonging. The moment she turned her back, Malcolm tapped into the back-end system again. He accessed the real-time staff logs, one of the few privileges only the founder and a select 2 executives had clearance for. There it was. Another entry, logged just 10 minutes ago. Passenger in 1A questioned service procedures. Continued monitoring recommended. He exhaled through his nose. Not even a lie, just twisted. Bent just enough to seem reasonable to someone skimming later. She was stacking a case against him, one entry at a time. He could see the setup. The next time he so much as raised an eyebrow, she'd flag him as disruptive. One more mark, and she'd have all the reasons she needed to report him to security upon landing. And from there, suspension from future flights, maybe even the no-fly list if she pushed hard enough. All for what? Sitting still? Asking for water? Not smiling back? His fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to delete the log. But he didn't. That would be playing her game. He needed more. The plane jolted slightly as it hit another pocket of turbulence. Brooke steadied herself with a practiced hand on the overhead bin. Her face didn't change, but the man across the aisle, Mr. Langdon, looked up sharply, clearly uncomfortable. He pressed his call button. Brooke moved toward him, and Malcolm caught her expression before she turned fully. A smile, but not the one she gave everyone else. This one was tight, fake, contained. Like she didn't actually like any of the people she was serving. Like it was all a performance she'd grown tired of. Something about that flicker stuck with Malcolm. She was tired, not physically, emotionally. He leaned back again, processing it. This wasn't just about him. Brooke had learned to fake her way through customer service, and she didn't hide it well. That meant this wasn't her first time walking this tightrope. And the real danger wasn't just that she'd been allowed to keep doing it, but that she'd gotten good at hiding the wreckage she left behind. He opened another window on his phone, the anonymous employee complaint portal. Most execs never even glanced at it, but Malcolm built that portal himself in the early days, when Sky Nova was small and every voice mattered. He searched one keyword, Brooke. Dozens of results, line after line of staff reports dating back years. She refers to certain passengers as them when speaking to crew. She uses coded language when reporting problem guests. She told me to be careful who you're nice to, or they'll expect it every time. His jaw clenched. None of these ever made it to HR. That's when Malcolm realized the truth. The problem wasn't just Brooke. The problem was who let her stay. As if on cue, the curtain to the galley rustled. Brooke stepped back into the cabin with a smile that no longer reached even halfway up her cheeks. She spotted Malcolm watching her. Their eyes met. She held his gaze for 2 seconds too long, then turned away. He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a small black notebook. It wasn't digital. No one could track it. No one could wipe it remotely. He wrote one sentence. Passenger in 1A, constructing a different kind of log. Then he shut the book. The plane droned on, a soft buzz beneath the mounting tension. And Malcolm? He wasn't angry anymore. He was focused, because if Brooke was documenting this flight, he'd be documenting her, and he had more reach than she could ever imagine. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the sun tilted west, stretching long shadows across the seats. Malcolm sat back in 1A, his notebook now tucked away, fingers steepled under his chin. Around him, the usual in-flight sounds played on. Soft murmurs of passengers, the hiss of the air vents, the rhythmic clink of ice in plastic cups. He wasn't listening to any of it. He was listening for patterns. Every instinct he'd honed over years of boardroom battles was now tuned into something else entirely. tone, word choice, where Brooke stood when she spoke, who she smiled at, and who she skipped. Across the aisle, Darius passed by, avoiding eye contact again. He was moving faster than earlier, shoulders tense, steps tight. Malcolm waited until the young man circled back down the aisle. When he reached Malcolm's row, Malcolm lifted his tray just a little, just enough to tip a napkin toward the aisle. Darius stopped. Their eyes met. Malcolm nodded, just once. Darius hesitated for half a second, then bent to adjust the tray. In the process, he slid a folded paper under Malcolm's coffee cup. Then he was gone. Malcolm didn't open it right away. Not yet. He waited until Darius disappeared behind the curtain, then quietly unfolded the note. Brooke's been doing this for years. Every time it's the same. She logs something vague. Staff backs her because they're scared to speak up. I saved some screenshots before the system clears the history. They're on a flash drive. I'll give it to you after landing. Just be careful. Malcolm closed the note, slowly, deliberately. He stared straight ahead, the message sitting like a stone in his chest. This wasn't a one-off. This was practiced. He picked up his phone again and tapped into Shadow Glass, the mirror system that let him look behind the curtain. Most executives never bothered to peek through. The logs confirmed it. Brooke had flagged 5 passengers in the past 4 months, all for behavioral concerns, all vague, no supporting video footage, and in each case, a note from a mid-tier supervisor backed her up without question. That's when Malcolm saw the name. Stephen Callan, Regional Manager, West Coast Division. A man Malcolm hadn't seen in nearly 3 years. Stephen had once been on the short list for promotion until he slipped up on a diversity training panel by saying, "Let's not overcorrect or we'll lose our best people." After that, Malcolm had quietly pulled his name from advancement discussions. And now, here he was, approving every one of Brooke's disruptive passenger reports, a quiet system of endorsement, hidden beneath digital neutrality. The paper trail was clean, but the smell of it wasn't. Malcolm looked up again as Brooke returned with a fresh round of drinks. This time she offered Malcolm a tray with a new drink. No words, no explanation, just a glance that lasted too long. He took it. "Thank," he said calmly. She gave a short nod, too fast, and moved away. But she wasn't as steady as before. Her eyes flicked toward the galley more often. Her shoulders held a tension that hadn't been there 2 hours ago. She knew something had shifted. She didn't know what, but she could feel it. And Malcolm? He was fine with letting her wonder. For now. He opened the tray table, set down his drink, and reached into his bag for a backup phone. One that wasn't connected to corporate systems. It ran cold. No synced contacts, no cloud backup. Just encrypted tools and a few private numbers. He typed out a short message. Shadow Glass confirms manipulation. Staff support pattern tied to Callan. Evidence incoming. Flight 882. He hit send. Somewhere on the ground, his private legal counsel received the message and began pulling up old HR cases connected to Stephen Callan. By the time they landed, the dominoes would already be wobbling. He slid the phone back into his bag and glanced out the window. The plane was flying smooth now. No turbulence, no interruptions. But Malcolm knew better. This wasn't calm. This was quiet before a reckoning. And this time, he wasn't the only one documenting what happened in Seat 1A. The descent announcement played softly over the speakers, just as the cabin crew began their final walkthrough. Brooke stood at the front of the aisle, going through her practiced routine. Seat backs upright, tray tables stowed, seat belts fastened. But Malcolm could tell her rhythm was off. Her gaze swept the cabin too fast. She double-checked rows that were already secured. She was slipping. Something was bothering her. Good. Darius hadn't passed by again. That was fine. Malcolm had the note. And the flash drive? He trusted the kid would come through when the wheels touched down. The boy was scared, sure, but there was steel under the fear. Malcolm had seen it in his eyes. Just barely. But it was there. He looked out the window again. The earth was rising to meet them, Chicago's skyline barely visible through the thin layer of cloud. The light was different now, cooler, flatter, like the world was holding its breath. As the plane began its descent, Brooke stopped abruptly 2 rows behind him. Malcolm didn't turn, but he could hear her. She was speaking to a middle-aged black man in 3B. "Sir, just a reminder to keep your electronics off during landing." Polite enough, on the surface. "I already powered it down," the man replied, not confrontational, just informative. "Well, I didn't see you do it," she said, just sharp enough for Malcolm to catch the shift in tone. A pause. "It's off," the man said again, more firmly this time. Brooke lingered. "Let's not make this difficult, okay?" Malcolm closed his eyes briefly. There it was again. The edge, the pivot, the way she said difficult like it meant something else entirely. He turned in his seat slightly, just enough to glance back. The man in 3B looked confused now, not angry. A woman beside him, his wife maybe, touched his arm gently as if to say, "Don't." Brooke stepped away at last, her smile reappearing like a mask dropped back into place. Malcolm didn't say anything. He just noted the time. 26 minutes until touchdown. He tapped open a voice memo on his phone and quietly recorded a description of what he'd just seen. Not because anyone would ask, but because next time, when she claimed the passenger was confrontational, he'd have a time-stamped log. Even if no one else cared, he would. And maybe that was enough, for now. 10 minutes later, the plane touched down smoothly, tires kissing the tarmac with a low rumble. The cabin clapped once. Habit, maybe, or nerves. Malcolm didn't join in. He just sat still, waiting. When the seatbelt sign clicked off, passengers began rising with that usual blend of exhaustion and urgency. The aisle filled with bodies and bags. Malcolm didn't move. He watched Brooke. She was in position, standing at the front, smile ready for each disembarking customer. "Thank you for flying with us." "Have a great day." "Take care." Each one delivered like a reflex, not a sentiment. When Malcolm reached her, she opened her mouth. He raised a finger casually. "Don't." She blinked. "What?" He leaned in, voice calm, quiet. "You may want to check the logs again, Brooke. I think they've changed." Her lips parted, just slightly. Her eyes flicked to his badge, but he wasn't wearing one. There was nothing identifying him, nothing official. Just a man, dressed simply, who somehow spoke like he knew things she didn't. Before she could respond, he walked past her, stepping into the jet bridge like any other traveler. Only when he was several paces away did he hear it. The sharp breath. That tiny intake of panic, like someone realizing they might have misread the entire situation. He smiled to himself, not out of cruelty, but clarity, because now she knew something was wrong, and she didn't know how deep it went. He walked toward baggage claim, the flash drive waiting in a young man's pocket. Legal counsel was likely already digging through files. And somewhere in a private office, a regional manager named Stephen Callan was about to have a very bad afternoon. Malcolm adjusted the strap on his carry-on and kept walking. The wind outside the terminal had that dry bite Chicago always offered in the fall, but it felt good. Real. He hadn't come here for revenge. He came for the truth. And now that he had it, he wasn't stopping. The airport terminal buzzed like it always did, half-tired travelers, half-frantic ones. Rolling luggage, coffee cups, muffled announcements that barely pierced the background noise. Malcolm moved through it all with that quiet kind of purpose, the kind that didn't need to push anyone out of the way but still made space wherever it went. Darius stood near a magazine stand, trying too hard to look casual. Baseball cap on, head low, hands in the pockets of his Navy Sky Nova jacket. When he spotted Malcolm, his posture straightened like a reflex. They didn't shake hands, didn't nod, just walked together, side by side, like two men heading for the same train. "You have it?" Malcolm asked, his voice low. Darius didn't answer at first. He pulled the flash drive from his pocket and passed it over like he was handing off a stick of gum. No words, just a quick look, half gratitude, half guilt. Malcolm took it, pocketed it without breaking stride. "You didn't have to do this," Darius said quietly. "I did," Malcolm replied, then paused. "But you didn't, and yet here we are." They walked a little further before stopping outside a quiet corner, near a closed smoothie kiosk. Malcolm leaned against the counter, watching people drift by with their little roller bags and their tired kids. "She's done this before," Darius said, voice tight now. "I saw her do it to a college kid last winter. First-class ticket, hoodie. You could tell he saved up for it. She wrote him up for being hostile because he asked why there were no headphones at his seat." Malcolm didn't react, just listened. Kid got a warning email, told if he caused another disruption, he could be banned. He didn't even raise his voice, man. He was polite, just confused. "Let me guess," Malcolm said. "No footage." Darius nodded. "Cameras go dark near the galley. No mics in the cabin. It's her word, and everyone's too scared to say otherwise." Malcolm studied him. Darius wasn't a fighter by nature. Not loud, not bold, but he had stepped into the storm anyway. That mattered. "You're not alone anymore," Malcolm said. He pulled out his personal laptop from his bag, opened it right there on the counter, and inserted the flash drive. The files loaded fast. Screenshots, audio logs, even a few internal memos Brooke had forwarded to Callan. One caught his eye immediately. "Passenger profile standard screening failed. Override used under policy 4.3. Ensure security alert is logged post-flight to support narrative." "Support narrative," Malcolm whispered under his breath. His jaw set, and he clicked through the rest of the documents. There were over a dozen names, dates, and incident tags, all tied to flights that matched Brooke's schedule. Some were filed under inappropriate behavior, others under crew discomfort, but the language was the same. Vague, thin, purposefully flexible. Then he opened a final folder. It was named simply Cleared Incidents. These weren't complaints. They were cover-ups. Internal emails showing Callan directing HR to close cases early. Notes from corporate comms suggesting language to use in apology emails that deflect blame without acknowledging fault. A draft statement meant for the media, never sent, but written, about isolated misunderstandings. He stared at the screen. This wasn't a personnel issue. It was a culture problem, a system built to protect the company, not the people. And worse, it had his name stamped on the top of every policy document. Sky Nova had always been his pride, his legacy, a symbol that a black kid from Oakland could build something clean, luxurious, respected. But now it felt like glass built over rot. Malcolm closed the laptop. "This goes all the way up," he said, more to himself than Darius. "And I let it. I built something with a clean logo but dirty corners." Darius said nothing, just waited. Malcolm turned toward him. "You said you saved this before it got wiped?" Darius nodded. "Good. That means we have enough." "Enough for what?" Malcolm exhaled, not sharply, not with bitterness, just like someone who finally saw the whole picture. "To tear it down," he said, "and rebuild it properly." He didn't mean destroy the airline. He meant something deeper. The culture, the silence, the rot behind the customer service smiles. He looked out the window again, Chicago in the distance, wind tugging at loose leaves and wrappers near the curb. "Can I trust you?" Malcolm asked. Darius straightened. "I'm still here, ain't I?" Malcolm offered the slightest nod. He pulled out his encrypted phone, sent 3 messages, one to his legal team, one to a trusted media contact, and one to a woman on the board who'd once told him, "If you ever get serious about cleaning house, call me." All 3 messages said the same thing. Audit request, full scope. Unrestricted, begins now. Malcolm tucked the phone away and picked up his bag. He didn't say goodbye. Just started walking toward the private exit. But before he disappeared into the crowd, he glanced back at Darius. "You did the right thing." And then he was gone. The kind of gone that didn't come back to check if anyone followed. Because he wasn't looking for approval anymore. He was chasing justice. The conference room on the 37th floor of the Sky Nova corporate tower wasn't built for comfort. It was built for optics. Glass walls, chrome fixtures, white marble table big enough for 12 but always seating fewer. Everything in that room was designed to project authority. Clean, expensive, intimidating. Malcolm sat alone at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. A black coffee, his third, sat untouched beside a manila folder thick enough to make his wrist ache. On the other end of the table sat Aaron Lowell, Sky Nova's head of legal. Silver hair pulled into a sharp knot, tablet balanced on her knee, eyes darting across the screen like a scanner at security. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, not for the first time. "No," Malcolm replied, "but I'm sure I can't ignore it." He slid the flash drive across the table, the one Darius had given him. "You've reviewed it?" she asked. "Twice. And the implications?" "Broad, ugly, avoidable." Erin leaned back, exhaling through her nose. "You understand what this will trigger? Internal audits, board inquiries, public filings, possibly federal investigation." He nodded. "You'll be questioned." "Let them." She stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing the man against the mission. Then she reached for the flash drive. "All right," she said. "We start here." The door opened and others filed in. Senior executives, division leads, two members of the board who happened to be in town. No one made small talk. No greetings. Just tension wearing designer suits. They all knew something was coming. Malcolm stood before the room had settled. "No slide," he said. "No handouts. Just the truth." A few raised eyebrows. One executive leaned back like he was preparing for a lecture. Malcolm ignored them. "Over the past year," he began, "there have been consistent reports of discriminatory treatment across multiple flights, mostly affecting passengers of color. Many were flagged as disruptive or suspicious, but when you read the reports closely, you find nothing but coded language and vague accusations." Someone shifted in their chair. "I used to think these were isolated incidents, human error, maybe even misunderstandings." He paused. "I was wrong." He gestured toward Erin, who connected her tablet to the central screen. Names appeared, dozens of them. Incidents, timestamps, staff notes, complaint summaries, faces, dates, destinations, patterns. Most of these were closed before they reached escalation. "Why?" he asked. Silence. A man across the table cleared his throat. "Are you suggesting our staff intentionally?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Malcolm said. "I'm showing you the data." More silence. The same staff member, Brooke Mallory, filed more disruptive passenger reports than any other crew member on record. All vague, all directed at black or brown passengers. Most were approved by a regional supervisor. That supervisor, Stephen Callan, bypassed protocol at least 7 times. "Do you have proof?" another executive asked, guarded. Malcolm looked at Erin. She opened another file, internal emails, screen captures, a policy override note signed off with Stephen's login. Proof. It hit the room like a hard wind. Some shifted. One crossed his arms. Another looked away entirely. "This isn't about one employee," Malcolm continued. "This is about a culture of indifference, about systems we built to protect ourselves instead of our passengers." He let that hang. "I founded this company to prove that service could have dignity, that flying didn't have to mean being judged by your shoes, your accent, or your skin." His voice stayed calm, but it tightened around the edges. "And now I find out we've been using that same kind of judgment. Quietly, repeatedly, systematically." A senior VP spoke up, his voice cool and rehearsed. "With all due respect, Malcolm, bringing this forward will open us up to risk, litigation, press attacks, stockholder backlash." Malcolm didn't flinch. "I know. Then why not handle it quietly, internally, controlled?" "Because that's how it got this far," he said. The VP opened his mouth, then shut it. Malcolm stepped forward, palms on the table. "I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what comes next." He looked around the room, not at their suits or their status, but at their silence, at the ones who wouldn't meet his gaze. "I've already submitted the flash drive to our compliance team. A copy has gone to our federal audit partners, another to the FAA. By the time we finish this meeting, the first internal audit will be live, and media holding statements will be drafted by comms." The room cracked. A woman near the back leaned forward. "You went around the board?" Malcolm nodded. "This board was too quiet for too long." No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Erin broke the silence. "We have enough to initiate full review," she said, "and we'll need to do it fast." Malcolm nodded, then quieter. "Let it fall where it may." He turned and left the room, not waiting for approval or applause. There was none. Just the weight of decisions made, truth uncovered, and a storm already rolling in. And Malcolm? He'd never walked straighter. Malcolm stood at the window of his office, 37 stories above the rush of Chicago's late afternoon traffic. The city below looked calm, gridded, orderly. But he knew better. The calm didn't mean peace. It just meant the chaos hadn't surfaced yet. Behind him, the soft chime of an incoming call buzzed on his desk. He didn't move. Outside, a plane cut across the sky, one of his. The Sky Nova logo gleamed on the tail, a symbol that once meant progress, pride, control. But now, it looked like it was gliding over a house he forgot to check the foundation on. Finally, he turned to the phone and tapped the speaker button. "Mr. Everhart," came a voice, sharp, clipped, but smooth. "Franklin Braxton, investor, strategic partner, and until now, the man behind too many silent vetoes." "We need to talk," Franklin said. No greeting, no preamble. "I figured you'd call," Malcolm replied evenly. "Is this your way of proving something?" Malcolm walked back toward his chair but didn't sit. "No, Franklin. This is my way of cleaning up the mess you told me didn't exist." There was a pause on the line, just enough to signal irritation. "You've already made it public. Audit orders, employee alerts, legal filings. Do you know how that looks to shareholders?" "I know exactly how it looks," Malcolm said. "It looks like we're finally taking responsibility." "You mean it looks like a scandal," Franklin snapped. "And let me be crystal clear. If this stock takes a nosedive, we both know who they'll blame." Malcolm stared out the window again. "I built this company," he said quietly. "You bought into it. Don't confuse the two. I backed you when no one else would. You backed profit. Let's not rewrite history." Another pause. "I trusted you," Franklin said, voice dropping half a note. "Trusted you to run a clean ship. Quiet, disciplined." Malcolm's jaw tensed. "You didn't want a clean ship. You wanted a silent one." There was movement on the other end. Papers shifting, maybe. Franklin trying to decide whether to push or pivot. "This doesn't have to get worse," he said. "You want to make a statement? Fine. Suspend the crew member. Reassign the manager. Let it cool off. But this crusade? This threatens everything we built." Malcolm let out a breath, slow, controlled. "We didn't build the same thing, Franklin. You built an investment. I built a promise. And now you're burning it down." "No," Malcolm said, stepping closer to the desk, voice firm now. "I'm rebuilding it. From the rot up." Franklin scoffed. "You think the world will applaud you for this? You think regulators care about intentions? You'll be labeled unstable, a liability. You'll lose the board." Malcolm smiled faintly. "Then let them try. Let them all vote." "Don't test me," Franklin warned. "I'm not," Malcolm said, reaching for a document on his desk. "I'm preparing for when you test me." He hung up. No threat, no theatrics. Just a click and the sound of wind brushing against the windows high above the street. He picked up the folder on his desk, complaint logs from the last 2 years, red-marked, annotated, with names, faces, patterns. At the top was Brooke Mallory. Below her, Stephen Callan. But further down, a dozen others, all quiet enablers, all parts of a system designed to protect perception over people. He picked up a pen and began marking names. Not in anger, not in vengeance, in order. Each one circled was a root. Each one would be pulled. There was a knock at the door. It opened before he could answer. Erin stepped in, eyes sharp. She held a folder marked Media Response Draft. "It's spreading," she said. "The story's already online. Local affiliates are picking it up. We've got about 48 hours before the national outlets catch on." He nodded. "Good." Erin hesitated. "You sure?" "It's about to get loud." "I'd rather loud honesty than quiet rot." She didn't argue. As she turned to leave, he called out, "Erin." She stopped. "If they ask, tell them I said it myself. Not the company, not PR, me." Erin studied him for a second, then gave a slow nod. Back in his chair, Malcolm stared at the blank wall across the room. For years, he'd meant to hang something there. A framed photo, an award, a newspaper clipping. He never did. Now he knew why. That wall wasn't meant for decoration. It was meant for a new blueprint, and he was ready to draw it from scratch. By morning, the headlines had taken their bite. Sky Nova under scrutiny after allegations of systemic discrimination. CEO Malcolm Everhart orders unprecedented internal overhaul. From the top down, can justice survive corporate loyalty? Malcolm sat in the back of a black sedan, crawling through early traffic along Lakeshore Drive. The phone beside him buzzed nonstop. Board members, journalists, department heads trying to calculate where to stand. But he let it ring. There was only one meeting he was preparing for now. The car pulled up in front of a private conference suite at a downtown law firm. The glass doors glinted with that high-polished corporate shine, the kind meant to silence nerves. Inside, the boardroom was already filled, 11 chairs, 10 of them occupied. Franklin Braxton sat at the far end, calm on the surface, but his eyes were storming. 2 seats to his left, a woman named Karen DeWitt, longtime board member, seasoned political player, sat with her arms folded, expression unreadable. The rest? A mix of old money, clean suits, and shifting loyalties. Malcolm walked in, head held steady, expression unreadable. No one spoke. He took his seat, the final chair. A man in his 50s with tortoiseshell glasses, lead counsel, cleared his throat. This special session has been called to address potential breaches in internal confidentiality and actions that may destabilize corporate structure. Franklin leaned back in his chair, hands folded neatly. "Mr. Everhart," he said, voice perfectly leveled, "we're concerned your recent decisions, while no doubt well-intentioned, have exposed this company to enormous risk." Malcolm met his gaze. "So has pretending everything was fine." "That's not the point," Franklin replied. "You moved without full board consent. You greenlit an external investigation. You released documents to regulators that hadn't been reviewed by our legal division." He paused. "That's a break in protocol, and you know it." Malcolm didn't flinch. Protocol didn't stop a passenger from being flagged as dangerous because of the color of his skin. A murmur ran through the room, quickly silenced. Karen DeWitt shifted. "Let's get to the heart of this," she said. "Are you saying the internal system we built, our policies, have been used to target passengers based on race?" "Yes," Malcolm said plainly, "and we've known about it longer than we're willing to admit." Karen nodded slowly. "And you have proof?" "I do." He motioned to Erin, seated just outside the circle of board members. She slid a thick folder to the table. Inside, printouts, screenshots, signed statements, even testimony from employees willing to speak. Anonymously, for now. The board flipped through the pages in silence, paper scratching softly in the otherwise still room. Finally, Franklin closed his folder with a loud snap. "This is damaging. Releasing this will cause stock volatility. We'll lose investor confidence. We may face lawsuits." Malcolm nodded. "Yes, we might." Franklin leaned forward, voice colder now. "So here's my proposal." He paused for effect. "You issue a controlled statement. We remove the employee quietly. We offer compensation to affected parties. We move forward, privately, strategically." "And the system?" Malcolm asked. "The structure that allowed it?" "We adjust policies, retrain staff, update protocol, internally." Malcolm leaned in now, just slightly. "You want to treat this like a PR fire. But this isn't smoke, it's rot. And rot doesn't go away with a fresh coat of paint." Franklin's eyes hardened. "You push this forward, and I'll call for a vote of removal, effective immediately." The room went still. The words weren't shouted, but they struck like thunder. Malcolm stood slowly, not defensive, just tired of sitting. "You think this is about a title? About holding on to the corner office?" he said, voice quiet but clear. "You think I need the CEO chair to matter?" Franklin's expression flickered. "I built this company to show that we could do things differently. That success didn't have to mean stepping over people." He looked around the room. "Maybe I've failed at that. Maybe I let too much slide. Maybe I trusted people like you to care about more than margins." He looked back to Franklin. "But I'm not walking away from this because you think I should play quiet. If you want my job so badly, take it." A pause. "Call your vote." Silence. Then Karen DeWitt leaned forward. I won't vote for your removal. All eyes turned. Because you're not wrong, she said. And because, for once, I want to be on the side that fixes it. One by one, others followed. 4 hands stayed down, 3 raised slowly, 2 remained frozen. Franklin's didn't move. When the final count came in, the vote fell short. Malcolm remained. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He just nodded. Because the room didn't need applause. It needed change. And he was already writing the next chapter. By the time Malcolm returned to his office, the sky had shifted to that slate gray color only Chicago could pull off. The kind that made the buildings look like bones, old and stubborn and unwilling to move. He stood by the window for a while, watching the wind toss leaves across the plaza below. His phone buzzed. Again. This time it was a text from Aaron. Brooke Mallory has been notified. HR proceeding with immediate suspension pending investigation. FAA has requested access to internal footage and logs. They're moving faster than expected. He exhaled quietly. Not relief, just acknowledgement. The kind you feel when a wheel finally turns after sitting too long in the dirt. He turned from the window and sat at his desk. The flash drive Darius had given him now sat in a secure envelope in a fireproof drawer. But the data was already backed up, duplicated, distributed. Truth, once seen, could no longer be buried. There was a knock. He looked up. Darius stood in the doorway, no uniform this time, just jeans, a hoodie, and that quiet, worn-out look of someone who hadn't slept much. Malcolm motioned him in. "Didn't think I'd be back here," Darius said as he stepped in, eyes darting to the walls, the sleek furniture, the weight of power that hung in the room. "Neither did I," Malcolm said. Darius took the seat across from him, but didn't settle. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "She knows, you know," he said. "Brooke. She figured out I gave you something." "She say anything?" Darius shook his head. "Not out loud, but she looked at me like I'd ruined her life." Malcolm was quiet for a moment, then asked gently, "Did you?" "No," Darius said quickly. Then he hesitated. I kept thinking about that kid last year, the one with the headphones. I watched him shrink, like someone turned the volume down on his whole spirit." He looked down at his hands. "I didn't say anything then." "You're saying something now," Malcolm said. They sat in silence for a beat. Then Malcolm reached into a drawer and pulled out a slim folder. "What's that?" Darius asked. "A job offer." Darius blinked. "For what?" "For staying," Malcolm said. "For helping rebuild what the rest of us let rot." Darius didn't touch the folder. "I'm not a hero." Malcolm smiled just a little. "Good. We don't need heroes. We need truth-tellers." He pushed the folder across the desk. Darius stared at it. "I'm going to make a department," Malcolm continued. "Not compliance, not PR. Something real. Internal justice. Independent. Loud when it needs to be." Darius looked up. "You want me to be part of that?" "I want you to help build it." The younger man leaned back, swallowing hard. His throat moved like he was trying not to show too much. "I'm in," he said finally. Malcolm nodded. No handshake, no speech, just 2 men understanding something that didn't need to be dressed up. As Darius stood to leave, he paused at the door. "You ever wonder if people like Brooke even realize what they're doing?" "All the time," Malcolm said. "But that doesn't excuse it. Not anymore." Darius left. Malcolm turned back to his desk. He opened his laptop and began drafting a statement, one for employees only. Not for press, not for investors, just them. It started like this. "If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unsafe on our planes, this is not your apology. It's your invitation. Help us do better. Hold us accountable. From this day forward, we don't fix things in silence." He paused, then he added, "We speak, we rebuild, and we remember who we serve." He hit save. Somewhere behind him, the clouds shifted. He didn't turn around. He didn't need the sky to clear just yet. He needed the ground to hold. Franklin Braxton wasn't used to waiting, but now, seated across from Malcolm in the same boardroom where he once toasted rising quarterly returns, he was doing exactly that, waiting, arms crossed, face calm, but there was a tick in his jaw that hadn't been there last year. Malcolm, meanwhile, didn't say a word. He sat with his hands folded, expression unreadable. Not cold, not smug, just done. Like a man who'd stopped trying to convince people and started preparing for what came after. "So this is what it's come to?" Franklin finally said. "Private meetings in half-empty boardrooms? No cameras, no statements. Just this?" Malcolm nodded slowly. "Just this." Franklin leaned forward. "You embarrassed the company. You embarrassed me. I vouch for you." "You vouched for silence," Malcolm said. "Not integrity." Franklin narrowed his eyes. "You don't get to play righteous now. You've sat at this table too long to pretend you just noticed how the system works." Malcolm's voice stayed even. "I didn't just notice. I just stopped looking away." Franklin smirked. "And what? Now you're some kind of corporate preacher? Think you're going to build a new airline out of thin air?" "I don't need a new airline," Malcolm replied. "I need a better one." There was a pause. One of those heavy ones that hangs in the air, just long enough to feel personal. "You think firing a few bad apples and drafting a few new policies changes anything?" Franklin said. "The machine doesn't care about your ethics. It cares about stability." "No," Malcolm said. "You care about stability. The machine cares about momentum. And right now, the momentum is shifting." Franklin shook his head. "You really think the board's going to back you forever?" "They don't need to," Malcolm said. "They just need to stop protecting what's broken." Franklin sat back, studying him. "You're going to regret this," he said finally. "Not today, but eventually." Malcolm smiled faintly. "I already regret not doing it sooner." Franklin's face twitched, just a little. Then he stood. "Enjoy the fallout," he said. He turned toward the door. "Oh, and Franklin," Malcolm added just as the man reached the threshold. Franklin turned slightly. "You may want to check your proxy agreements," Malcolm said. 3 of your silent partners have signed theirs over." Franklin's lips parted, but no sound came out. "You're not untouchable anymore," Malcolm said. "Not in here." And with that, Franklin walked out, shoulders stiff, stride clipped. Malcolm sat alone in the room, letting the silence settle. No satisfaction, no triumph, just gravity. He turned to the window, his reflection faint in the glass, layered over the city beyond. There was something poetic about it. The man in the reflection still wore the same suit, still had the same face, but he wasn't the same man who'd let things slide for the sake of optics. That man had worn a mask. This one? He was ready to meet his own eyes, and whatever came next. The terminal at O'Hare felt different this time. Malcolm didn't arrive with a team, no entourage, no press, just himself, a duffel bag and a boarding pass, economy class. He hadn't flown in coach in years, not because he thought he was above it, but because somewhere along the way he'd let comfort replace clarity. Today he wanted clarity. He passed through TSA like everyone else, shoes off, laptop out, belt in the tray. No one recognized him. That was good. He didn't want to be recognized. He wanted to see. Gate B-22 was crowded. Delayed flight, middle of the afternoon, nowhere to sit. A little girl sat cross-legged on the floor, headphones on, chewing gum like it was a challenge. Her mom looked tired. Her dad was scrolling on his phone, eyes darting up every time an agent walked by. Malcolm leaned against the wall, hands in his jacket pockets. A gate agent called for Group 1. First-class passengers stood. He didn't move. Group 2, then 3. When they called his group, Group 5, he joined the line shoulder to shoulder with a dozen others. No status, no special boarding lane, just a barcode and a bag. As he reached the gate, the agent scanned his pass, paused, then looked at him. "Sir, I think there's been a change to your reservation." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "Change?" The agent double-checked the screen. "You've been upgraded. Seat 1A." Malcolm blinked. "That's not necessary." "It's already processed, sir." He exhaled lightly, not annoyed, not surprised either. Somewhere someone had seen his name, pulled a favor, or maybe the system had flagged him out of habit. Old perks die hard. He took the new ticket and walked down the jet bridge, slower this time. The plane was smaller than the last, a regional flight. Still, first class had its polish. Leather seats, folded napkins, coffee already brewing. When he stepped inside, he saw her, not Brooke. Brooke was gone, on leave pending investigation. But another flight attendant, a young black woman, maybe in her late 20s. Name tag said T. Marshall. She turned, met his eyes, and smiled. Warm, easy. "Welcome aboard," she said. And for the first time in weeks, Malcolm let his shoulders relax. "Thank you," he replied. He took his seat in 1A, again. Same number, different flight, different weight. As the rest of the passengers filed in, he noticed something. A middle-aged man in coach struggling with an oversized carry-on. A kid behind him trying not to bump into anyone. A woman adjusting her scarf, clearly nervous. No one was being watched, judged, flagged. Ms. Marshall helped the man with his bag. The nervous woman? She offered her water before takeoff. It wasn't a perfect flight. The coffee was weak. The guy next to him snored. But none of that mattered, because something had changed. Maybe not everything, but enough. As they climbed into the sky, Malcolm looked out the window. The clouds drifted past slowly, soft and quiet. He thought of Darius, of Aaron, of the boardroom, of the passengers whose names he still remembered. He pulled out a notebook and wrote one line. Not the end, not the beginning, but a better middle. Then he closed it, leaned back, and let the hum of the engine carry him forward, into whatever came next. The doors had barely opened when Brooke Mallory stepped into the Skynova headquarters, but she already knew. Something had shifted. It wasn't the receptionist's quiet stare or the way her ID badge blinked red instead of green at the turnstile. It was the silence. That specific kind of silence that happens when people know something you don't. She took a breath and moved forward anyway. Chin up, heels tapping like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. She'd gotten the email that morning. Subject line, administrative leave pending review. It didn't say much, just that she was to report for a meeting with internal HR and corporate legal. Brooke hadn't slept. She'd read and reread that email all night, waiting for it to vanish. It didn't. Now she sat across from two people she'd never met, an HR rep named Janice and a corporate attorney whose badge simply read W. Owens. Malcolm wasn't in the room, but he didn't need to be. There were documents on the table, a folder with her name on it, a cup of untouched water. "Ms. Mallory," Janice began, voice even but cold. "Today's meeting is not disciplinary in nature. It's investigative. You are being given an opportunity to provide context regarding a series of passenger reports you filed over the last 2 years." Brooke blinked. "Passenger reports?" Owen spoke next. "We've reviewed digital logs, crew communications, audit flags, and multiple internal testimonies. There appears to be a pattern." "I was following protocol," she said quickly. "Every report I filed was based on training. I followed what I was told to do." Janice didn't nod. She didn't react at all. "There are notes indicating selective targeting," Owens continued. 5 of the individuals reported were passengers of color. All incidents lacked corroborating staff support. In at least 3, the behavior described doesn't match the footage we were able to retrieve. Brooke's voice shook slightly. "I wasn't trying to target anyone. I made a judgment call." "A judgment call that cost one man his job," Janice said quietly, sliding a document forward. "Another lost access to his frequent flyer account for over 6 months." Brooke stared at the paper. It wasn't just lists anymore. It was names, faces, people. "I didn't mean for any of that to happen," she said. "But it did," Owens replied. "And that's what this is about. Intent versus impact." They asked more questions. She answered some, danced around others. By the end of the meeting, her hands were trembling beneath the table. "You will be placed on unpaid leave pending further review," Janice said. "If there is a formal hearing, you will be notified. Do you have anything else you wish to say for the record?" Brooke hesitated. For a moment, just a flicker, it looked like she might cry. But the tears didn't come. Instead, she asked, "Is this coming from Malcolm?" Janice exchanged a glance with Owens. "No," she said. "It's coming from the system he rebuilt." Outside the office, Malcolm sat by the glass railing overlooking the atrium. Not watching, not spying, just waiting. When Brooke exited the hallway, she saw him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither moved. Then she looked away and walked toward the exit, slower now, not defeated but no longer certain. Malcolm remained seated, still and steady. It wasn't joy he felt. It wasn't triumph. It was weight, lifting. Not all of it, but enough to breathe. The next morning, Malcolm stood at the edge of Gate 17 at Oakland International, the very same terminal where everything began. He didn't have a bag, no flight to catch, just a clipboard in hand and a purpose humming low and constant in his chest. The airline's newest employee orientation was wrapping up in the corner. 10 recruits sat in a semicircle, wearing fresh uniforms and nervous smiles. One of them, a young Latina woman with box braids and a fire in her eyes, raised her hand when the facilitator opened for questions. "What happens," she asked, "if we see something wrong, but the system doesn't back us up?" The room stilled a bit, like the air pressure dropped. That's when the facilitator turned toward Malcolm. "Mr. Everhart," she said, "you want to take that one?" Malcolm stepped forward, eyes calm, voice steady. "You report it anyway," he said. "And if the system doesn't back you, then the system changes. That's the job now. Not just flying people from place to place, but making sure the ground they walk on when they land feels just." The young woman nodded, her shoulders straightening. The others followed. After the orientation ended, Malcolm took the long way through the terminal, past the coffee stands, the gates, the row of tired parents and solo flyers scrolling their phones. He listened, not to what people said, but to what they didn't. No tension, no stares, just travel in its messy human form. He passed a gate agent helping an elderly Vietnamese couple navigate a boarding app, a crew member refilling a bottle for a kid mid-tantrum. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was better. When he stepped outside into the early California sun, his phone buzzed. A message from Aaron. "FAA cleared our compliance reforms. Federal audit closed with recommendation for industry adoption. Also, stock just bounced." "Sil Piocinto," Eob Malcolm smiled to himself. Just a flicker. Then another message came in. "Darius, you were right. Truth doesn't destroy trust, it earns it." He tucked the phone away, stepped toward the curb, and hailed a cab. No black car, no assistant, no grand exit, just a man going home. As the car pulled away, Malcolm looked out the window. A Sky Nova plane rose slowly into the sky above the airport. Wheels up, wings tilted, nose forward. Not a symbol anymore, a promise. Because change, real change, doesn't begin in conference rooms or press statements. It begins where people sit elbow to elbow, 36,000 feet in the air, waiting for someone to show them they matter. And now finally someone would. Because Malcolm Everhart didn't just build an airline, he rebuilt what it meant to fly. And this time, everyone was cleared for takeoff. So what can we take away from all this? Maybe it's this. Sometimes real power isn't in titles or seats at the top. It's in having the courage to speak up when staying quiet feels safer. Malcolm Everhart didn't just fight for justice. He rewrote what accountability looks like in a world that often confuses silence with professionalism. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed unfair treatment, but felt like no one would believe you if you spoke out? Drop your story in the comments. We read every single one. And if stories like this matter to you, if you believe kindness, courage, and change still have a place in the world, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because next time, the person no one's paying attention to might just be the one rewriting the rules.